Okay, verse 8a says, uh, "My son, hear the instruction of your father." And then the all of verse 8 says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father, and do not forsake the law of your mother." So before I talk about the difference between instruction and law as they relate to the complementary roles of the mother and the father, first I'm going to talk about the difference between the command to hear the father's instruction versus the command to not forsake the law of the mother. So I believe that with the phrasing here, Solomon has implied that the instruction of the father is more universally present than the law of the mother. Now, both the law of the mother and the instruction of the father are present beyond the mere presence of a Christianly mother or father. Most obviously, there's the father figure or mother figure. You could have a Christianly stepfather or stepmother or half um, not you can't have a half parent. That's not how that works. But you know what I'm saying. You can have a someone take up that role that's not your biological father or mother, right? Um, but then I think that the instruction of the father goes even beyond that, and I think what Solomon is referring to here is the universal care that God has given men for their posterity or their next generation. I believe this is present even in men who are drowning in vice in the most profound way you can imagine. Think about groups of men in prison who will, despite their various, spiritual ailments, they still have a sense of morality enough to um, become almost violent and vengeful toward fellow criminals who have committed crimes against children, right? Um, and then, okay, this also reminds me of a lyric from the song "The House of the Rising Sun." "The House of the Rising Sun" is a folk song that is old enough that we don't know the author. It is at least universally um, compelling enough to have remained a part of American culture for um, decades and decades and decades. So there is something that is universally compelling about it. That's because the song itself is about vice, and the singer, or the author, it's sung from the male perspective, who is drowning in vice himself. And the House of the Rising Sun itself is a place of vice. Some people think it's referring to a bar, other people think it's referring to a prison, but regardless, it's referring to a place that represents vice generally. And there's a lyric in the song that says, "Mothers, tell your children not to do as I have done. Spend your lives in sin and misery in the house of the rising sun." And so the idea here is that even as a man drowns in vice himself, he might lie to himself about his vice, say that he doesn't have a problem, he can quit anytime he wants. He might lie to his spouse even about his vice, and then to the people above and around him. But then as soon as it comes to the next generation, to his own kids or to his posterity in a more general sense, there's this sudden shift of don't end up like me, right? Be better than me. Be virtuous, right? Don't fall into this vice. So hear the instruction of your father because it's all around you and it's a gift from God. So now do not forsake the law of your mother. Now, the law of the mother being less universal, this makes it a more tremendous blessing. And I think that the vast majority of us in this room do have that, do have a mother or maternal figure who is Christian, or at least Christianly, and gives you law. So, like the parable of the servants and the talents, which I've mentioned earlier, this gives you a greater responsibility to act virtuously. And so, thank God for this blessing every day because it's not extended to everyone to have that maternal presence. Now, let's talk about the difference between instruction and law. So, it says, "Hear the instruction of your father." Now, fundamentally, the difference between instruction and law is that law functionally, well, theologically, on a theological level, the moral law exists to show us our iniquity. But on a practical level, the law exists, and remember, this is a very practical book, Proverbs. The law exists as guardrails to society, right? To keep and maintain people, essentially. Whereas instruction is a command. If law is a thou shalt not, instruction is thou shalt do this, right? So instruction is telling you to do something, law is telling you not to do other things. And I think this is reflective of how the father and the mother are to love children differently. Because the father is called to love a child for their potential, right? And sort of draw that out of the child to say, go forth and make good on this potential that God's given you. Whereas the mother is called to love the child as they are and to make sure the child is aware of their inherent value that God has given them. And these are both incredibly important, which is why you see children who lack a father figure or lack a maternal figure end up messed up in different ways because they either don't have this sort of ambition to make good on their potential, or they don't have this understanding of their inherent worth and their inherent value as human beings, right? So hear the instruction of your father and do not forsake the law of your mother. Now, verse 9 says, for they, referring to the instruction and law themselves, will be a graceful ornament on your head and chains about your neck. The ornament on your head and the chains about your neck are symbols of status. So they would have made you set apart from the people around you in the time that this was written, and they would have also made you an example to others. And so this can be summed up as holiness. And so an obedient child becomes a holy adult. And to treasure the instruction of your father and the law of your mother will make you holy. It will make you set apart and an example to others. And this is tremendously important. If we're not set apart, then why would anyone believe our testimony, right? It's our word against theirs unless they see that there's something within us that is different. So that's all I have. Just remember to hear the instruction of your father and not forsake the law of your mother. Thank you. That's all.